In this video, we're going to use the angle sum theorem to go ahead and find some missing angles in these two triangles. So notice we have a large triangle and then we have a smaller triangle that's inside of it. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few things. Your questions typically are going to say, what is the measure of? And it'll have an angle symbol, for instance, DBC. And when it's asking me to find DBC, I'm going to go ahead and highlight the angle it's asking for. It wants me to find DBC. In other words, it wants me to find this angle right here. Now notice this shares an angle with another triangle, right? Because there's one inside of it. So notice we do have a right angle symbol there. So we're going to have to do some work in order to find what this specific angle is. And then once we find it, we also have to find another angle over here, which is ABD. So notice we have A, B, and D. In other words, the other half of this angle. And we're also going to be asked to find the angle of BDA. So for instance, B, D, and A. So those are three angles we're going to find. I'm going to go ahead and just highlight each one of those that we're trying to find. So that's BDA. Already highlighted. DBC, yellow. And then our last one that we're trying to find, that middle one, was ABD. So A, B, and D. So those are the angles that we are trying to find. So let's go ahead and start with the first one. So we want to go ahead and we want to find D, B, and C. Now notice we already have two angles that we're given. We're given this angle, this 100 degrees, and we're given this one that's 50. And so we can use those two numbers to find this DBC, right? In other words, to find this angle right here. Now we know that in every triangle it has 180 degrees, right? That's our angle sum theorem. So we're going to use that idea to solve and see what is this angle. And we're going to call this one X for now. And then we're going to solve for X. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to move my camera down just a little bit. And I'm going to write the information that we do know right underneath DBC. So what we do know is we have 100 plus this angle, which is 50, plus the missing angle that we don't know what it is. I'm going to call it X. And that's going to be equal to a total of 180 degrees, because all three of these angles added together gives me 180. I'm going to go ahead and combine these two angles that we know. So 100 plus 50 gives me 150. And then we still have our plus X is equal to 180. And I'm just showing this step by step. The next thing I want to do is I want to move the 150 over to the other side of the equal sign, right? We want to keep this equation balanced. So it's a positive 150, so I'm going to subtract 150 from both sides. All I'm left with on this left side is simply X equals. And on this right side I have 180 minus 150, and that's going to leave me with 30. So I'm going to box it. So in this case, I have my angle of X, which is which is basically the variable, right? X is just the variable that I decided to use to represent angle DBC. So I can go up here and I can put underneath it, this is 30 degrees. So we figured one out. So I'm going to go ahead and put the angle of measure of angle DBC is equal to 30 degrees. Alright, so now we just have two more angles to find. Alright, I'm going to move this down real quick. I'm going to look and see which one would be the next easiest to find, in my opinion. And I think the next easiest to find is going to be this orange one right here, right? And our orange was angle BDA. So for instance, from BDA. So we're going to find that one next. So this one is next. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm just going to call it X for now because I don't know what it is. We're trying to find it. And I'm going to start writing my equation based on what I do know. So let's go ahead and set this up. So what we have here is, I noticed that we have this line that comes down and cuts part of this angle out, right? So part of it is x right here, and the other part on the other side of it is 100 degrees. And what I do know is if I create a straight angle, in other words, if I go from this flat line all the way over to the other side, I know that that total angle, any straight angle, is 180 degrees. So I'm going to use that idea of a straight angle is 180 degrees to figure out what x is. And when I write this out, what I'm going to write is I'm going to go ahead and put x, because that's that angle that we don't know what it is, plus the other part of the angle that's on the other side that was given, which is 100 degrees, has got to be equal to 180 degrees. So this is a more simple problem, right? We don't have as much going on. It was mainly just setting it up so that we can solve it. And so since I'm adding 100, if I want to move it to the other side of the equation, I'm simply going to subtract 100. Now, of course, on this left side, 100 minus 100 is 0. And that simply leaves me with x is equal to, and 180 minus 100 is going to leave me with 80. So therefore, the measure of angle BDA is 80 degrees. Alright, so we're almost done. So now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and find our final angle. So in our final angle, right, in this particular image was up here at the top. And so notice, right, we had kind of part of it looked like a right angle, but we don't know if it cuts it in the middle, if it's a little bit off. But what we do know is we already figured out this angle up here, which is 30 degrees. We also figured out that this one down here is 80 degrees. So there's really two ways you could go about it. But I think the easiest way that we could go about this is we can go ahead and add this angle, and then use an x for that one, and subtract it from, and then we can subtract these two values once added from 180, and we'll know exactly what that angle is. The other thing you could do is, since you know this side is 30, and you know there's a right angle here, you could go ahead and say 90 minus 30 and get the answer as well. But I'm going to go ahead and go with the first one. So let me substitute the two values that we have for ABD. So that's A, B, and D. B's in the middle, so we're looking for this angle up here. I'm going to go ahead and draw my little curve, and I'm going to call it x again. And write my third equation. So I have x plus 80 degrees plus 40 degrees is equal to 180 degrees. Now I'm going to combine my terms now. So let me show you just what we're going to do. We're going to combine 80 and 40. It's on one side of the equal sign. So 80 plus 40 is going to leave me with 120. I'll just simply bring down the 180. Bring down my x. And now I need to get that 120 away from the x. So we want to move it over. So to move it, I'm going to do inverse operations. So instead of adding 120, I'm going to subtract it. That zeroes it out on the left. And then I'm going to subtract it over here on the right. And 180 minus 120 is going to leave me with 60. And over here we simply have an x left over. So we got x is equal to 60. Therefore, angle ABD is equal to 60 degrees. Now I told you we could have found it another way, but we could have just subtracted that angle at the top. But let's go ahead and let me show you we would have got the same answer. So for instance, we knew this angle was 30, and we know that this right here is the other half of that angle, or the other, I shouldn't say half, but the other part of the angle. And we know that this symbol says that this whole angle is 90 degrees. So we could have also simply just got a calculator. And for instance, I'll grab a calculator real quick just to show you. And I could have just typed in, okay, well we know the whole thing is going to be 90 degrees. So I could type in 90 degrees and then subtract 30 degrees from it. And we also would have got 60. So whether you add the two angles at the bottom and x all together and set it equal to 180, and you use your inverse operations. Or if you were to just recognize that this part is 30, so the other part of this is going to be what's left over from 90, you could have said 90 minus 30 and got 60. So more than one way to solve it, but this just gives you an example of how to go about it, creating equations.